and welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Dawn Lane, and I am the Program Manager for the Massy Learning Institute. We are living in some unpredictable times, and the ongoing fear, isolation, grief, and the uncertainty created by the COVID-19 pandemic and other natural disasters can really wear us down. Many children and teens have had an especially tough time coping emotionally. At the same time, many families have been separated from their loved ones, their caregivers, and their grandparents. These are all vital sources of support to our children and our families. Today's session, entitled "The Mental Well-Being of Your Child or Teenager in the COVID-19 Pandemic," is a very real and timely topic, which will be presented by Dr. Karen Moore. This presentation today will look at the changes in children's and adolescents' lives which have been taking place as a result of the pandemic and other disasters. And it will identify which of these changes may constitute to the threats to our children's mental well-being. In the session today, the concept of mental well-being will be briefly explored, as well as the discussion of strategies for helping maintain the mental health of children and adolescents in the family. So let me tell you just a little bit about our presenter today. Dr. Karen Moore is a clinical psychologist working with children, teenagers, and their families. Her areas of specialty include working with child abuse, especially child sexual abuse, trauma work, and parenting training. Dr. Moore also works in disaster mental health as coordinator for the Franciscan Institute Trauma Team, which is a team of mental health professionals providing free mental health interventions in response to natural and man-made disasters in the Caribbean region. But before we get started, just a little housekeeping. If you have any questions or comments during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A box. We will have a question and answer segment at the end of the presentation to respond to as many questions as we can as time permits. If someone types a question that you wanted to ask, please click the thumbs up icon next to that question. This would help us to further select questions which you have been keen to hear answered. Now, it is my pleasure to hand you over to Dr. Karen Moore. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you very much, and welcome to everybody who signed on to this webinar. I know that we've been inundated with webinars over the past year because everything is online. And so I really thank you for making the time to turn up and to give an hour out of your day to hear, hopefully, some new and useful things to you. So here we go. This is on the mental well-being of your child and teenager at this time. And these are the objectives. We're going to define mental well-being. I put for children and adolescents, but really for everybody. Identifying challenges to mental health, which have arisen as a result of the pandemic. And I'm going to identify strategies to help support your child and teenager's mental health. So what is mental health? We're all very clear what mental illness or instability is. Mental health is not just the absence of mental illness. It's not just a state of neutrality. So World Health Organization defines it as these: a state of well-being, where every individual can realize his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and every individual is able to make a contribution to her or his community. Okay, so the World Health Organization defined it as that. And then an organization called Mind, which is a charity in the UK focused on advocating for mental health and supporting people with mental health challenges, operationalized that definition, so broke it down into specific behaviors. So these were the objectives here, and we were moving on to what is mental health and the World Health Organization definition of it, which I had just read out. Okay, as I was saying, a charity called Mind in the UK, which focuses on supporting people with mental health challenges, broke it down into specific behaviors. And these are here on the screen. I'm going to be moving a little bit quickly because I have not quite a few, but for the time I have a number of slides. But I do know that this is being recorded, so I imagine that people will be able to access it later. So these are the behaviors: caring about yourself and for yourself, loving yourself, not hating yourself, looking after your physical health, seeing yourself as being a valuable person in your own right and not having to prove your right to existence, judging yourself on reasonable standards, not being perfectionist. And then I added a few things. Mental health also includes the ability to understand, accept, and manage one's emotions, the ability to engage in healthy reciprocal relationships, and looking after one's mental health as well as one's physical health. Okay, so those are definition of mental health altogether. Here are the disruptions that we have all faced at this point. Every single one of us, no matter where we're living or what resources we have, we've had to deal with these things. The disruption in social interaction, disruption in physical exercise, isolation at home. You can see all of these. This is the overall context in which we are all operating at this point. So our children and teenagers also operating within this context. Each of us, each separate group or family or individual will have their own specific challenges, but this is our overall context, all of these disruptions. So for children and teens, these are their disruptions. And I have focused on school because school is such an enormous part of their lives. I know that I am talking to participants from around the Caribbean, but we all have a common educational structure, which is really exam-based. So our children, education is a huge part of their lives. So they have lost all these things from school. They've lost the face-to-face social interaction. They've lost the structure and routine of going to and from school. They've lost having a normal timetable. Timetables have been adapted. So for little ones who are, say, 6 or 7, the timetable may have been adapted where they only have 2 or 3 hours a day, or they have online live instruction maybe every other day. At least that's how it's operating in Trinidad. There's been a huge amount of disruption. I know in some territories they've been able to go back to school, but they lost that. So even the children who are back in school went through this loss for a significant period of time. So some territories were able to open back up earlier than others. In Trinidad, we still have not opened back up. Some territories have gone through opening and then maybe needing to close for a little bit again. So there has been that disruption for all the children. They lost all these different things. And online school, this is what normal school is like, a normal class environment. You have a changing visual field, which means you're seeing many different things happen. There's background sound, and then there's the sound in the foreground. There's human interaction and nonverbal communication. You're feeling textures and surfaces. You're feeling breeze blowing across your skin. There are scents and tastes, and there's physical movement. In a classroom, there's a huge amount of physical movement. You have to stand up to answer questions. You stand up when people come into the room. You are going up to the desk to hand up your book to the teacher. You have to come up to do things on the blackboard. So this is a normal class environment. And when we get to the pandemic class environment, online school, all these things have gone. They don't have these inputs. So for the children who were or still are in online school, they lost all that stimulation, which is an integral part of how children, especially little children, learn. Students in exam years, and this is for the ones who are in school or out of school, there's the unpredictability. There were so many changes in when CXC exams, which are the regional ones, were going to be held. That's in addition to the uncertainty for national exams, because each territory does SCA at their own time, or they did different things with SCA. Okay? There's going to be anxiety from last year's experience when, if I'm doing exams this year, I saw what happened last year. I saw all the queries, the errors, the uncertainty, the changing times. There's anxiety over whether I'm prepared enough because there was so much disruption. Am I prepared to do exams this year? Right? So this is what our children and teens are facing, at least the school age ones. So going back to the disruptions we've all faced, they've got all of that, plus they have all of these going on as well. This is their context. Now, not all disruptions are challenges to all children and teens. We have to acknowledge that. There are some children who absolutely love online school and it has really worked for them. Some children have loved being at home and not having to face traffic, getting up early, coming home late, etc., etc. So not everything will be disruptive to every child. But here's something that we really need to keep in mind. How we often tend in this region to look at mental distress is we look to see if the child or teenager is showing anything. And if they look like they're all right, then they are all right. And we have to start shifting that perspective and go from the other end, as it were, where if an event has happened which would normally be distressing or disruptive, whether the child or teen is showing signs or not, we have to assume that there's been some disruption. And it may not show up at that point. Often these things show up later and they are hidden for some time. So we have to assume these children are living in a pandemic situation. They may be looking fine, you know, staying up late, staying on their devices, getting up late because it's online school, etc., etc., etc. But their world has turned upside down, especially in Trinidad or any other territories where they haven't gone back to school yet. They have lost a big chunk of their lives in that way. So we're going to look at mental health again, run through these slides really quickly, because I want to pinpoint the specific areas where there are mental health challenges. These won't be all of the challenges, but these are examples. So we had the World Health Organization definition. Okay, we had that definition operationalized. We had these added in that I put in there. So let's look at the challenges. Every individual can cope with the normal stresses of life, but we have extraordinary conditions and stresses. This is an event that happens literally once in 100 years. And we, lucky us, we turned up in time for it this year and last year. So this is extraordinary. So that's a huge challenge. Your normal mental health state of mind can cope with something ordinary. This is extraordinary. We have part of mental health is that every individual can work productively and fruitfully. How do you do that? How do you work productively and fruitfully if you're doing school online, or even if you're back out to school, if you lost a chunk of your schooling because of the pandemic, because most territories shut down? How do I cope with that? Because now I have to make that back up. So that really affects my ability to work productively and fruitfully. You exercise. Children have lost a lot of their physical exercise and sunlight. Activities are restricted. Going places is restricted. There have been shutdowns in our islands from time to time where movement is very, very restricted. So if you had a child who was into extracurricular sports and was going to football and this and that, they may have lost a lot of that. Okay? You enjoy yourself. Well, you lost a lot of your normal activities. Beaches were closed. I know in Trinidad, I know going to the river was closed down, cinemas were closed down, going on to restaurants was closed down, it was pickup only. They had all of those. Okay? You see yourself as being a valuable person, and you have the ability to engage in healthy relationships. If you lost your school and your social networks, you couldn't get together with friends for a while. Those social networks in school, they are important sources of relationship, and they're also significant factors in your identity. Our children and teens see themselves to a large extent as who they are in school, what kind of student they are. That got disrupted. That got badly disrupted during this pandemic. And again, I keep emphasizing this point. Even if school life has returned to what it was, that doesn't mean that the impact of what happened is now over. Those effects still happened and have to be worked out. You judge yourself on reasonable standards. What standards can we apply in a pandemic, especially around school? We expected our children to keep doing school and to keep progressing at the same rate, no matter what happened, no matter if they were online for a while, if there weren't any classes online for a while, if they were online, then back up to school, then back online again. We're expecting them, and the children are expecting themselves to continue. What's a reasonable standard in a shifting and unpredictable situation? Okay, so these are some of the very specific challenges that they are facing to specific areas of their mental health. The ability to understand, accept your emotions and looking after your mental health. Oops, sorry, I apologize. I went backwards instead of forwards. When you're in a long-term situation of chronic trauma and crisis, your emotions become much, much more difficult to understand and manage, and looking after your mental health becomes more difficult as a result. And remember, these children are dealing with not only the disruption in school, which I've focused on, but the disruption with family. So parents who lost jobs, who lost income, who are now part-time instead of full-time, what's happening with the house, parents who were not essential workers, could not go out to work for a while and were home, parents who had to stop working because children were at home and somebody had to be there to supervise the children. All these things have also affected them. And this is, make no mistake, this is a chronic trauma situation, and it is worldwide. So it's not like there's terrible crime in Trinidad, so I'm going to emigrate, or I'm going to go away for a holiday. Wherever we go, there's this pandemic. And that constitutes a huge trauma situation. So the major challenges for our children and teens are the decrease in physical exercise, especially the outside time. Many children, because at least again in the territories where there's been online school, either they still have that situation going on or they had it. They were inside a lot. Some children didn't go outside or are not going outside for the entire day. There was a loss of social interaction and activities. Though they may be back in school, they may still be feeling the effects. They may have lost social interaction in other ways, because when there's a shutdown and a restriction, then you can't see your friends, even though school may be still fairly normal, or you were in school normally for a while. When there's a shutdown, all of that stops. So you lose that again, and you lose the interaction with family. And the loss of the enriched school environment when you have to do online school. What can help? Generally for teens in this situation, they are becoming adults. They want a sense of control. They react very badly to feeling that they are being controlled, as all parents of teens will know, or that they have no control over a situation. which we all react badly to. They need some solution to some aspect of the situation. We cannot fix the pandemic for them, but there may be some small thing that they can do. So, for instance, it might be useful for them to engage in some volunteer work. And again, restrictions on movement, it might be something they could do online. So they might get together with a couple of friends and we're going to be doing calls to elderly relatives online just to check in on them, call them on the phone. Okay, so something like that. Or just within the family, the team can be in charge of, you have to call both sets of grandparents or elderly aunties or uncles or whoever. You're the one who calls and checks that they're okay. They need to know that they're doing something tangible. And the reason I suggested doing it as a team with friends is they need that sense of their tribe. The family tribe is something they are now moving beyond, and they need that friend tribe. So coordinating something with even a small group of friends can help. These are general things. For the little ones, they want clear parameters and expectations. So you have to lay out a recipe for them. They're very rule bound. They want predictability and routine, which can be hard in this situation. So this is where it's important to keep family routines going, and they need a job to do. So if you say to them, okay, things have changed, this is your job that you're doing to help out with the fact that things have changed, it then again gives them a sense, okay, I am doing something. I have a place in this new order of things. And for very little ones, they need the people who are taking care of them to be okay, and they need their routine to stay as far as possible where it was. And when that's not possible, you use anchoring points. So if there was a morning wake-up ritual and a bedtime ritual or an eating dinner together ritual, you use those specific rituals. You keep those as far as you can, those routines, to anchor their day, even though the rest of the day may be very different from what it used to be. If you can even begin and end the day with a routine, so I'm waking you up and I'm putting you to bed, that can work. It gives them points of predictability. Okay, so moving quickly along, here are some specific strategies. Again, I'm going quickly through this. Limit, as a family, limit your social media consumption. Time outside in sun and fresh air. Daily physical exercise. It doesn't have to be something big. You could walk around the house for 10 minutes. Just something. And do something just for enjoyment, purely for enjoyment, each day. And this is something that we don't do. But this is something your children and teens need. And it needs to be non-electronic. Because I know sitting staring at the devices is something that they enjoy. It needs to be non-electronic. They had enough of that when they had online school or are still having online school, okay? So I'm focusing on things that are relatively simple and easy to do and that are quite physical. And now I'm getting to the last few slides where I'm giving you where you're thinking outside the box. So get out into the garden if you have a garden. If you don't have a garden, you can plant things in a grow box. Putting your hands in dirt is great for children and teenagers. Absolutely wonderful. And they may not be much of a gardener, but they can go outside, they could pull up weeds. You could decide to weed a specific part of the yard. If it's a grow box, they're planting things. There's a reason why schools give that experiment every year where you put the kidney bean in the wet cotton wool, because it starts to grow so fast. And they get to look at it every day and see something different. So you get a sense of achievement. It's also very tactile and sensory. A lot of the things I'm going to suggest are like that because that helps to anchor you. And it gives you, it can give you a pleasant sensory feedback. So getting your hands down into the dirt. Some may want to use gloves. Some may want to just put their hands in there. Keep in mind, not all of these will work for all children and teens, but hopefully there will be one or two that will work for you. Cooking and baking, again, that's sensory. Measuring out the flour, measuring out that, kneading bread or rolling up pastry, rolling out the pastry dough, handling chopping vegetables, or rubbing seasoning on chicken, something like that. All of that, again, is very sensory. You're getting the sense as well, the feedback. If you're tasting some of the gravy you made, for instance, or the soup you made, you're getting that taste feedback. It's very involved. It's very practical. Cooking has to happen in all our households. So getting them involved in that can help. Spend time taking care of pets. The pets should never be just the parent's responsibility. Taking care of pets is great. It has really tangible benefits for your mental health because you're doing something for another being. And it's also really rewarding because of the unconditional love that you get from pets. So spending time taking care of pets is a great one. It's really important. If children haven't been involved in that, now is a great time. Mommy and daddy have so many other things that have to get done, extra responsibilities because of the pandemic. So you get the job of doing this or that. Again, this is more suitable for some children than others. You will know your child and your teenager. So this helps. So there's always something to do with a pet, whether it's brushing, whether it's bathing, whether it's just sitting and petting, whether it's feeding, always something. Paint on the walls. You will get plenty of takers for this one. Children love to paint on walls, as we all know, to our cost. And it can be done, and it's a great thing to do. These two here, painting on the walls and chalk drawing, that's about creativity. Usually we'll have some paved area outside. If you don't have a yard, you may have a driveway. You get big jumbo chalk if you can, and you do chalk drawings on the sidewalk. It's easy and it washes right off. And you can do a new one every day. And it's creative, and it's also physical movement using your large muscles. Painting on the walls is also using the large muscles of your arms. So you can tape up sheets of newsprint on the walls and you can paint. Even teenagers may enjoy this. They can redecorate their room every single week, taping up newsprint, painting a new background. It can work even for children who are not particularly creative. You could put a sheet of paper on one wall, and this is, your feelings or your anger wall, and you can, paint angry stuff on it when you feel angry, and then you can pull it down and throw it away and tape up a new sheet. So it's useful for many things. Singing together or dancing together. Give your children a chance to really, really laugh and have fun with you and laugh at you as they watch you trying to learn a dance, if you all learn a dance together. And we're always saying, oh, you young people thing, and we can sometimes be very critical of it. So it's a really different for them if you say to them, that looks interesting, could I do that? And they look at you and say, oh no, you're way too old. And you say, well, teach me the steps, let me see how to do it. Group dancing is really good for your mental health, actually. It has some good benefits. The brain likes to follow patterns, and these are nice predictable patterns. So when everything else out there is unpredictable and you have learned the steps to a dance, you have something predictable that you can do. And again, it's something creative, and you feel at the end like you've produced something, and you've performed. Singing together. I know that we can't go out there and sing with strangers necessarily, because there's been research on, singing and the fact that it projects droplets in people who may be unaware that they have COVID-19, etc. But singing as a family together can be very useful. They can also sing online together. Singing where you have to do the deep breathing, what they call diaphragmatic breathing, is actually really good because it exercises a specific part of your nervous system that helps in calming and soothing. So singing together can be something that it feels satisfying, and it is actually really working for you in a physical and neurological way. Singing is great. Singing is very, very useful. And again, playing in water, you can take it outside. Even if you have limited water supply, which happens in this region often, you can fill a small bowl with water. And that water can become anything. You can put rocks in it, and it's the Pacific Ocean. You make little paper boats, and you sail on it. You have deep sea divers going down in there. You put a plant in there, and it's an underwater jungle. This is imagination. This is creativity. This is also the sensory feeling of putting your hands in water. A lot of children like putting their hands in water. If you feel a little brave, you can get some actual sand, some beach sand, and put there in the water. Playing with wet sand often feels very, very satisfying and very, very soothing. Kinetic sand, which is less messy, is also a great thing to have. The sensation of it again, can feel very satisfying to some children. You can make different molds with it because it will hold shapes, and you can squeeze it together in your hands. If you have never felt kinetic sand, it's worth feeling and trying. Again, we're looking at sensory things. Okay, a lot of the things that I've suggested here, if I go back, are very physical. And you'll notice that I am not suggesting whether you sit down and talk to them and so on. We do a lot of talking in our Caribbean culture. You cannot talk mental health into somebody. And I'm saying that as a therapist. You can't talk it into somebody. You can't tell somebody, this is what you do, and then they do it and they become mentally healthy. They need experiences. Physical experiences like these that I've suggested here can be very, very beneficial and very fruitful for young people. They are also easy to implement. It's not something that you necessarily have to be around all the time for. And they can do these things on their own. And it gives them a sense of mastery, of ownership, of achievement. I've grown something, I cooked something, I sang something, I learned to dance, I painted, I drew in chalk, I bathed the dogs. I did something successfully. And that is really important for our mental health. And with that, having gone just a little over my time, we're done. So I want to thank everybody for your attention, and we're now open for questions and comments. I know I went through that pretty quickly, but here we are.
Hi, good morning, Dawn. Good morning, Dr.
Good morning.
Our first question this morning. Good day. I have 2 young children doing online school, 7 and 9 years old. Their grades have not been affected by online school. I can see where they have their moments when they display mental stress. Questions like, when is coronavirus going to go away? Or, I miss playing at the playground at school. Or, if coronavirus wasn't here, we would be doing so and so. So how do I strike a balance, even when I myself get stressed out mentally as well?
Okay, so it sounds as if this person, thank you for your question. It sounds as if you're trying to figure out, how do I answer these children's questions? Because there is no answer to when is coronavirus going away. So that's a question that parents can't answer, but what you can answer is you can say, well, here's what's being done about it. Vaccines have been developed. People are getting vaccinated. This has opened back up, or that has opened back up. These are the things that we're doing. And then you just have to acknowledge, yes, you're really fed up, and so am I. There are times when you cannot fix something, and you don't, as a parent, you don't have to fix everything. You can acknowledge how hard it is, and that, it's just really difficult. And you don't have to put a but in there. But look at what's happening. But you still need to do your work. But you don't have to put a but. Say, yes, this is really, really, really hard. This is really tough. What do you think would help us maybe feel a little better right now? So listening, acknowledging, and letting them know the specific steps that are being taken forwards for us to move out of this situation. But there's no good answer to when is this going to be over.
Thank you so much for that response. We have another question here coming in, just dropped in. My son is 18 years old. He is an A-class student, but recently he has been saying he's tired of this type of schooling. Not quite a question, but I guess this is a comment.
Yeah, of course he's tired. Online school is a completely unnatural learning environment. And remember, we're talking about developing brains here. At 18, your son's brain is still developing. Your brain keeps developing up until age 25 or 26. So for a brain that's still growing and that really needs that external stimulation, it's very hard to sit and look at a screen, especially in situations where your cameras aren't required to be on. So you're not even seeing friends' faces. You are seeing a blank screen with maybe some avatars or icons up. That's what you're seeing. It's completely non-responsive. You're hearing the teacher's voice or you're seeing the slides that were put up. So yes, he's definitely fed up. See if there's other, you could see if there's other activities that he could be engaged in that are face-to-face in person that can feel more productive for him. So he's actually doing something physical and he's not in that very disconnected world of online school. Because if he's 18 and he's at a fairly high level and he's probably been preparing for exams or just had exams, he's had a lot of focus on that screen. So focus elsewhere can help.
All right, thank you so much. Another one just dropped in. Good morning, Dr. Moore, and thank you for your excellent presentation. What are your recommendations regarding screen time outside of online school and any extra activities? Tablets are being used to communicate with friends. What is a reasonable time for this?
That one is a really hard one because all of us who thought we had a good structure going and we had good guidelines, then the pandemic came. And it's really important for them to connect with their friends, and often the only way is online. However, after having spent a day in online school, there needs to be some activity that is not online. That's where they need to get outside in the sun. I know that right now, that may not be feasible in some territories. Barbados had a lot of dust and ash. I think Grenada was getting some ash, so you could not be outside. But some physical activity inside. So they get a break from online, and then you have a specific friend time, maybe an hour. I wouldn't go longer than an hour. Because they need to be interacting with the rest of the family. Because what has happened with a lot of young people is they're in online school, they have to be in a room on their own, so they're undisturbed, and then sometimes they have online lessons, they have assignments that are online they have to get done. So this child ends up spending the entire day isolated in a room, coming out to eat, use the bathroom, then the rest of the time they're online, then they're studying or whatever, they might chat with friends online. People in the family have become very isolated from each other. So yes, I would certainly allow online time aside from school to connect with friends. Keep it to say an hour, and then interaction with the rest of the family, which means the rest of the family also has to be mindful of not being on devices all the time.
Excellent, thank you. A good follow-up question to this then would be, what do you recommend then for the Zoom fatigue?
For the Zoom fatigue?
Yes.
Yes, that is hard. I know that some schools have a routine where they have class for an hour and then they give you an hour's break or some sort of break. Your child needs to get up during the breaks. If you're not required to have your camera on, your child needs to get up during class and do some stretches every 15-20 minutes. Because if they can do that while still listening, and it can be simple stretches, stretches to the side, touch your toes a couple of times, or just stretch up, reaching your hands up to the ceiling and stretching your body and maybe twisting a bit twisting all the way as far around as you can to either side to ease your back. That helps. That really helps. And restricting the online time aside from school will also help with the Zoom fatigue. Because we're really not meant to be sitting looking at this screen. It's not meant for our eyes. It's not meant for our body to sit that way. It's not meant for our brains for that to be the only way that we're getting stimulation. It's not meant for any of our systems to be doing this for any length of time. The best exercise for the brain is exercise. And that's a quote from a neuropsychologist, sorry. Best exercise for the brain is exercise. So getting up and moving about at any break they possibly can will help with the Zoom fatigue.
Wonderful, thank you. So before I move on to the next question, I would just share the comments we have here from Sharon. I just wanted to validate one of your points. Last night, my daughter and grandchildren were singing karaoke. I walked in and took my daughter and started to dance with her. There were squeals of delight, and the evening went to a different level.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that comment. That's great. Dancing and singing. Perfect.
That's
Perfect.
Wonderful. All right, on to our next question. Good morning, Dr. Moore. Thank you for a very eye-opening and inspirational presentation. I am a parent of 3 children, ages 6, 10, and 12. Both my husband and I are working full-time and are trying to juggle meals, school assessments, chores, etc. How can workplaces and leaders of organizations be more sensitive to our continuous interruptions in our workflow?
Okay, so I assume, thank you for that question. I assume that person is working from home, and therefore that's why they're talking about having to interrupt the workflow. I think this is a point where it's really important for organizations to hear from their employees, because schools in any one territory will tend to have fairly standard like lunch breaks, mid-morning breaks, mid-afternoon breaks. There's, when school ends at 2:30, 3 o'clock, etc. This is something that workplaces didn't have to take into account before, because the parent would be at work and would have made arrangements, and now work is at home. So I think this is where workplaces need to meet with employees and hear, okay, we need not to set meetings between, let's say, 11:30 and 12:30 because that's lunchtime. Not just for our employees, but that is when school lunch is on, right? So employers won't necessarily have thought of those things or know those things because they haven't had to think about those things. And now they do. So it's really important to have some open dialogue about that, and for employees to come together, because they're going to be shared and common concerns and issues. And this is where it takes really flexible thinking and being willing to step outside that box. Okay, so it works better for you, for maybe the single parents among you. It really works better to have maybe very early morning meetings when the children have just gone into school, or maybe it works for you to have meetings at separate other times of the day. This is something where employees have to speak out, and employers really have to listen, because again, expecting the normal standards and the normal ways of working during this situation, it's not realistic. That will not happen. That cannot happen. The other thing is, if there's a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, that's perfect. Then they get to be in charge of lunch. Start them off with 1 day a week, and then maybe you can ramp it up. If they're going to fight over who does lunch, then one does lunch on one day and one does lunch on another day. Give them specifically, okay, you all can have these choices, and then they boil the hot dogs, or they, put together something simple, warm up whatever. They do lunch. They will love the responsibility. They will love that they have a choice. They will love the sense of achievement that they get to produce the lunch, and they also have to produce lunch for you too. They feel really, really big and important when, I brought mommy lunch and I made sure that I brought it with plate and I brought it in napkin and I brought her something to drink as well. So I brought mommy and daddy lunch and mommy and daddy ate lunch that I did. It gives them a real sense of achievement and power. And it also takes something off you at that point. So you could try that too.
Wonderful. I love that. Thank you. All right, on to our next question. Is there a trend you are seeing with regards to the specific areas children are struggling with?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Seeing a lot more depression and anxiety, a lot more withdrawal. It may be because of the specific conditions in Trinidad where our school children have been off school for over a year now, since March 13th last year. So it has been a year and a month. So we're seeing a lot of that. We are seeing withdrawing from the family, withdrawing into their rooms, lot of anxious behavior, many more reports of anxiety, and children who might have been somewhat vulnerable but were managing okay. Many of them have gone into depression, and they're really missing friends. They're missing having their lives back. It has been really hard. So I would say that we're seeing a definite upsurge in anxiety and depression, specifically linked in Trinidad and Tobago to loss of their normal lives over the long term.
Wow, okay, thank you so much. Our next question here. As a parent, I am having trouble dealing with my own stress, and I'm now worried that I could contribute to my children's stress. How do I help them?
Help yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to help yourself first. You have to put on your own oxygen mask before you put on that of your child. And there's a reason for that. The parent who thinks, no, let me help my child first, because you're overstressed or you don't have oxygen, you can collapse. And then there's nobody to help your child. So some of the same things that I suggested, some of the strategies like doing something you enjoy every day, limiting your social media interaction, because there's always some fresh disaster on top of the pandemic that is being put about on social media. Doing gardening if you like gardening, or doing extra cooking and baking. You can do these things for yourself first, and then you can help your children. Because when you are feeling more in control, feeling more at peace with yourself, then how you change with your children changes, and they can feel more relaxed and at peace, and okay, mommy's back or daddy's back. That's the person that I know. Now I'm feeling better. So address your own stress first. You must address your own stress.
Thank you for that answer. Our next question here. How can we encourage the sensory activities you mentioned if our children aren't interested? Teenagers tend to be at the stage where they don't want to do things with their parents at times.
I hear you. That's a good question, and it's fine. They don't have to do this with you. They can wash the dog on their own. They can go out there and pull up weeds on their own, or plant things on their own. They can cook or bake on their own. They can put things up on their wall and paint on their own. They can do that. They can absolutely do that. You as a parent can say, we are all going to have dinner together, or lunch together, or breakfast together, because you want one meal at which you see everybody's face and they all have to come out of their rooms. You as a parent can say, right, we are all going out in the sunshine together. It might be that, oh, we've got to clear up the front yard, or we had to clear up the driveway, or we have to pick flowers for Granny's birthday tomorrow, or something. You get everybody outside in the sunshine, and some things like that have to be mandatory. Sunshine, 15 minutes a day, everybody, wherever possible, where environmental conditions permit, right? Otherwise, there are a number of things that they can do, and if they are There's going to be something that they're not resistant to. And it might be the pets that they're not resistant to. It might be the cooking or baking that they're not resistant to. You find the easiest point of entry for them. What also helps is if you start doing something yourself. So and it helps if it's something really unpredictable. So they come home and they find you taping up this big sheet of newsprint on the wall, and then you start painting. Or if you've got the washable paints or markers, they come out of their room and they find you painting thoughtfully on a wall. And they think that you are mad. And then they want some markers too, because they want to paint on their wall. And so you start something. So sometimes you have to start something, and the odder it is and the quirkier it is, the more likely that they will find a way to get into it as well.
Okay, thank you. I like that one. We have a similar one here. In Barbados, we have an added restriction with the ashfall and accumulation outside. Please give some additional internal activities for teens especially. And how do you explain to the children in a way they can understand that the world is not coming to an end? Well, at least not right now.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll take the second part first. You get very factual with them. And this is where you're also teaching them to be very critical and media savvy, because there was something going around on social media that the underwater volcano of Grenada, there had been a warning that it was going to erupt, which turned out to be untrue. So you say to them, okay, they're concerned about what is happening. Is this the end of the world? No. Let's look at what the Seismic Research Center is saying, and this is what they're saying. And they're saying that this is going to happen, and this is probably going to happen, and this is probably going to go on for some weeks, and we can look back for pictures or video from 1979 when this happened before with La Soufrière, and this is most likely what's going to happen, and you might be able to find a video that is, demonstrating in graphic form what happens with volcanoes and how it works. So all of this that is happening is completely normal. People have been moved out of the area, people have been taken to safety, and we're getting all this ash, and you might get them interested in what the content of volcanic ash is like, and so on. So you get them into the facts of it. Once you have the facts, you feel more in control of a situation, right? When it's all totally unpredictable, that adds to the trauma and the stress. So they're getting some facts. What can they do inside? This is where you can do the water play. You fill up the bowl with water. If you're lucky enough to have no problem with water supply, you might fill a bigger tub with water, and you can do all kinds of things in that. You can do the painting on the walls. You can, and this is great fun, if you have old sheets that are kind of plain and light color, don't have much of a pattern, big white sheets, you could get out an old sheet that you're willing to sacrifice, or not sacrifice, to repurpose, right? Big old white sheet, and then you sit down and you paint the soles of your feet with paint. And you walk on the sheet, and you say, okay, this is my journey in life thus far. And then on the sheet, you might put objects, or you might paint a little something saying, when I had just started my journey in life and I was 18 months old, that's when my beloved great aunt came to live with us. And that was a wonderful time of my life, so maybe I'll paint a heart there. The more unusual it is, the more likely your children are going to get into it. And at this point in their life's journey, there's a little pile of ash because there's a volcano that had erupted. So there was ash on a volcano. So they might put a little piece of ash, or they might draw some glowing coals or whatever. So there was a volcano eruption. Doing that kind of thing, a journey, is really useful. Or if you want to just have fun, you put the paint on the palms of your hands instead, and you make handprint pictures. So you're making handprints all over the sheet. And you say, hey, I'm doing a family photo, a family portrait here. I just need your hands. They're going to look at you and say, portrait, what portrait? Say, yes, hands are individual, fingerprints are individual. Nobody else in the world, no group of people, other group has the fingerprints that our family has. So just give me a hand here, let me paint them a second, and right, put your prints here. Great, you're part of the family portrait. Things like that. It takes getting really creative and a little bit playful, but you can do different things. You might want to get out the family albums, photo albums, and start telling them family stories. And if you have some family stories that are slightly scandalous, they will love it. So you say, oh, this is your deceased great aunt, whatever, and there's a photo of great aunt looking very straight and prim. You say, and that was her first husband. And we don't have any photos of her with her second husband because she ran away and her second husband was a sailor. And the two of them ran off on a ship. And we got letters and postcards from her, so we know that she was having a good time, but we have no photographs because she just ran away from the family. Every family has some slightly scandalous stories. The really scandalous ones you may not want to tell them, but there's some slightly scandalous ones, and they love hearing stories. And you can, you might have photos of yourself. Oh, this is me when I was 18 years old. Don't think I want to discuss that. And they will go, what? Say, no, you're not quite old enough. And it might be a story about how you sneaked out at night one time, you climbed through the window, you went to some party, or you went to line by a friend and you had to sneak back in the house. It might not be anything very big, but it's a story about you when you were doing something that they just don't associate with mommy or daddy. So family album, photos they may not have seen before, and you start going through photos. It helps if when you tell them come and look at photos, they might not. But if you're sitting down at a central location, like where everybody has to have dinner, and you're sorting out all these photos and you're picking up some and chuckling, you kind of draw them in. So there are different things that you can do. So I hope some of that helps.
Wonderful. I love those ideas. Thank you. Okay, so we are actually out of time, but I will just ask this very last question we have here. How do you deal with a young child who displays signs of anxiety, a 9-year-old who becomes anxious in simple situations?
Okay, so thank you for that. That sounds like that predated the pandemic. Right. Anxiety can be tough to deal with because often we try to approach it with reason and say, no, this is not going to happen. See, and that doesn't work. Or we try to reassure the child, or the child says, well, you come with me, and say, okay, I'll come with you. And those things can actually help the anxiety to get worse, because now the child thinks, oh, it's so bad that mommy agreed or daddy agreed they had to come with me. So the next time there's no question, somebody has to come with me because that's what I had to do last time. That one can be difficult. It may be difficult enough where you have to consult a professional. There's some things that can help. I'm thinking very quickly. Really simple breathing exercises. This one is really simple. You breathe in for 3, as deeply as you can, and then you do a long breath out through your mouth for 7. So for little children, it's like blowing bubbles. So you ask them to breathe in. If you have bubble solution, when they get anxious, okay, so let's do some blowing bubbles. And they have to do a long breath out through their mouth, and that calms you. So then you can say, okay, so let's think, what needs to happen here? What's going on? What's happening? What are you anxious about? So that's just an instant calming one. Okay, sometimes the child might need something like what they call a transitional object. So it's something that they associate with you, or something that they associate with safety, like a stuffed animal, or maybe a photograph of somebody, or an action figure that's big and tough and can beat up the situation or beat up anxiety. But as I say, if it's complicated enough or intense enough, you might need to consult a professional, because that sounds like it was going on before. Or the child may have been vulnerable before but managing, and then the pandemic came along and just tipped them over into anxiety. Some good physical exercise that really helps with anxiety as well. And if the 9-year-old may be kind of reluctant, you can say to them, mommy or daddy, I notice I'm put on weight in this pandemic. I need some help. Would you skip with me or would you walk with me? Because, it's tough for me to do it on my own. So they're helping you out. They're getting some exercise, if possible, out in the fresh air. It's dry season, fruit picking. Encourage them to climb up trees if they're okay with that, or they can be with you. You might try going with a fruit picker or climbing on the lower branches of the tree and dropping the fruit, and they have to run around with a bag and catch it. Something physical that's getting them moving. So doing that regularly helps their system. But at the instant of the anxiety, they can do the breathing. Okay, but do keep an open mind about possibly referring to a professional.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Moore. I hand you back over now to Dawn.
Excellent. Thank you, Renee. And I do not know how many thanks I can put into words to you again, Dr. Moore, for being here with us today and sharing this very factual and important information with us, and with so many ideas to help us and our children in this new journey. So thank you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation. And thank you, everybody, for staying with it.
Excellent. So we have come to the end of yet another MLI webinar. I want to thank you, everyone, for joining today. And as we leave, let's remember our brothers and sisters and their children in St. Vincent who are currently suffering through the La Soufrière eruption, and those in the other islands who might be affected by the ashfall and all that brings. Also, remember to look out for our MLI flyers, for our paved and other webinars. And again, I say, level up until we meet again. Bye-bye.